Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi. No, it's more just like sitting down handshake. How are you?
The lights.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called a meeting to order. Vice Mayor Kaplan.
Yep, here.
Councilmember De La Cruz.
Here.
Councilmember Groves.
Here.
Mayor Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember McCormick.
Here.
Councilmember Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mayor, even though we don't need one for a workshop, but it's nice that everybody is in
Absolutely.
attendance.
Thank you all for coming.
So,
Thank you.
Your
Yes, welcome everyone. At the request of our council members, we have established this workshop to discuss really the history of our land acquisition mission, why we created the Land Acquisition Committee, and really see how things have evolved, and then later discuss what the priorities have been for the village based on historical priorities and how they have evolved and how they've stayed the same. But I'd like to start with our attorney, Steve Helfman, giving us an overview of the land acquisition, the desire for land acquisition, the funding, and how that evolved into what we have now.
I'm happy to do so. And I'm doing this sort of from the perspective of the adoption of two different ordinances that we enacted that have brought us to where we are today. And so the concept of land acquisition goes back to the origination of the village. In terms of sort of a formal land acquisition committee, which is, I know, the generation of this meeting tonight, that really originated in 2010. And we adopted an ordinance at that time which established the first formal land acquisition committee. And the purpose of that is what it has been to today, which was principally and primarily a committee that would advise the council on the acquisition of lands primarily for park, recreation, and open space purposes. Okay? That was the goal and the purpose of the committee as it was formed in 2010. The committee is still, as it was created, still in effect. The members, I don't believe, are the same members that were appointed in 2010, but the same basic framework of the Land Acquisition Committee is still in place today. The committees, I talked about the purpose of it, but just let me read briefly again under the jurisdiction section, which is sort of the power of the committee from the original ordinance. It says the jurisdiction of the committee shall be limited to studying, evaluating, and making recommendations to the village council regarding the acquisition of land, primarily for park and recreation purposes. Okay? That was the intent of the creation of this committee. And then it goes forward and says what they should consider in preparing their recommendations to this council. And they should look back to the vision plans that we have, the financing opportunities that are there that could fund acquisition, land available for both acquisition and leasing, okay? So leasing was contemplated that you might be leasing land. And then also they should examine interlocal agreements that might be a possibility between the village and probably the county or the city of Miami, who are the property owners, the other property owners on the key. And the committee had not a specific date of termination, but it was contemplated that at some point there would be a final report from the committee that their work was done and the committee would be dissolved, or the manager would report to you that the committee has completed its work and it was dissolved. There was one other way that the committee would end and terminate, and that was if the council decided that it was no longer necessary, and then you just simply notify the committee that you no longer needed their advice and recommendations. So that was in March of 2010. Okay? I don't know. I was here. I don't have a recollection. I'm sure I will be told. But I don't remember under this original ordinance whether any actual properties were brought forth for acquisition. Okay? It may have occurred. I just don't recall whether the committee actually brought forth something more than sort of a general plan, but actual properties that they were proposing that you acquire. So let me take you back, or just back about a year ago when we re-looked at and revisited the committee formally as the council, okay? Because at that time, there was an initiative by the, I think he was vice mayor at the time, Michael Kelly, to try to reinvigorate this committee. And what drove that was the fact that he was behind an effort to create a land acquisition fund, a more permanent fund where you all contributed money to that fund each year as part of your budgetary process. And once that was part of your code and ordinances, Michael came forward and said, okay, now we got to do something. And he even suggested a land acquisition committee, which we then said it already exists. We have one. It's in place. And that committee began the original process again, okay? It was a bit awkward in terms of how the committee related to the council and how proposals were to be brought forward. And after an initial proposal to purchase a piece of property, which, for lack of a better term, got all messed up, you all, as a council, the prior members, decided to go back and adopt a revision to the ordinance, okay, in which you laid out a process by which acquisitions would come to you, okay, because previously under the old ordinance, just make a recommendation with no manner of doing that, okay, just says come and make a recommendation. So that wasn't working, and what you did a couple of years ago was to say the process should involve the administration, okay? And if the committee has a proposal for the council, they should first submit that to the manager. The manager will review it, and if he feels that it has any validity, if it's worth pursuing, then he's to bring that to you. And what he brings to you under the ordinance is an actual contract, okay, that he, together with the committee, has secured for a piece of property. Those contracts, by the ordinance, have to have a contingency in them, obviously. The committee and the manager cannot bind you to buy property. So that ordinance, 2 years ago, when we adopted it, set up this process with the ultimate decision by the council. But it was at a stage when the land was actually secured, and you would have the opportunity to look at it and say yes or no. And in at least one instance, you did that. We have a pocket park or neighborhood park as a result of that, and in a couple of other instances, they were rejected either by the manager or by the council. So that sort of brings us to today. That's historically where you are. I think that there was a sense of the council when this came up that the process is still somewhat dysfunctional, okay? And that was the impression that I got. In fact, to the point where there were some of you who actually just wanted to go ahead and terminate the Land Acquisition Committee because you didn't feel that there was any real purpose to it anymore. But that was deferred to this workshop, okay? So the only thing that I can add, other than to now sort of frame where you are, which is re-looking at the Land Acquisition Committee, whether it works, whether you want it to continue, whether you want to continue in the form that it is, whether you want to alter that form, whether you want to dissolve the committee. That was the purpose of the workshop today. I will tell you that the one thing, having sat with the committee on numerous occasions, not all of them, but certainly when they reconstituted themselves, I think that there is a lack of clear understanding as to what the goals of the council are, and they may change from council to council, and sending that message clearly to the committee. I think that that if you have a committee and you continue with a committee, I think it's critically important that there are very clear goals as to what you are, not just as it is any lands for park and recreation purposes, because that just leaves open. And so if something's brought forward and is rejected, somebody says, well, we don't need that little piece of property. Well, then why did we waste all that time doing that? I think that there needs to be, even maybe before you decide what to do with the committee, an understanding of what the goals of the council are. Because if the goals of the council are to go out and negotiate interlocal agreements with other governments, you might want the committee to do that. You may not, but you certainly would want to maybe reconstitute it, because if you're going to have people out negotiating real estate interlocal agreements on behalf of the government, you probably want to put people on the committee that have some experience in negotiating sophisticated real estate deals. Okay? So my impression is that it really originates from here. Depending on your goals, you can then decide whether you need a committee to assist you and what that committee looks like. So that's where we are, Mayor.
Thank you.
If I can add anything further, I'd be happy to.
All I could remember in terms of the piece of property was the Bayside property that was proposed, and I think it was originated from a group including the Land Acquisition
Okay,
Committee.
that may be.
And Frank, did you want to?
Starting with, I was the first chair of the Land Acquisition Committee. There were no recommendations initially. The initial work was to review the background, the history, and to try to develop a synopsis of what the priorities were based on needs, to try to understand some of the old, going back to comp plan time, historic data, updated data through 2020, and to boil down categories of properties that would be targeted to meet specific purposes. That's where it all started. The Bayfront Park Initiative was brought to council under contract through a straw. Council approved the acquisition and did not approve the financing, despite the fact that the Trust for Public Lands was willing to bridge finance it for basically no interest for 5 years. In my view, that was a mistake. I'm not sure that I recognize the purpose of this. I am becoming more used to dealing with alternative facts, but I didn't think this was what we were doing tonight. I thought what we were doing tonight was not primarily about the Land Acquisition Committee, but primarily about the history of our land acquisition efforts, the dissuading the proposition that had been floated at one of the meetings that this entire process is willy-nilly and ad hoc and dysfunctional, probably parsing why the methodology that we tried to adopt to make this more, the word we use is nimble, so that we could actually have a chance of getting something under contract without blowing the fact that the village was trying to negotiate for a sale. And leading to a discussion of what next. That's what I thought we were doing tonight. And I'm not sure what we're doing on the dais at a workshop.
And I'll tell you, this is, it's perfect reason to be here because I think different people have different priorities and desires and different takes on what needs to be discussed, and that was articulated in a meeting, and so we all decided to hold a workshop so that we could discuss freely and really educate ourselves.
We decided to hold a workshop.
I think we need to hear from the rest of the council members because there was some questions.
Well, at a workshop, I think we'd like to hear from these people.
Well, and we will, but we are in the kind of setting the context of what we're doing. Gary.
The kind of guiding light for this whole topic of land acquisition and other important projects for this community has kind of been the Vision 2020 plan. And this plan came into existence 11 years ago, and 2020 is 3 years from now. The plan was well executed, it was well thought out, and when it was written, I think it was very responsive to the needs of this village and the condition of the village. This place has changed so much in the last 11 years in terms of population, in terms of development, in terms of traffic, in terms of a major dwindling in the supply of potential properties to acquire, and so on. And to me, I think we need a sense of direction, not just the LAC, but all of us, a sense of direction. And to me, the starting point is I believe that this Vision 2020 plan, which encompasses our vision, our collective vision of what we want this village to be over the next 10 or 15 years, this plan needs to be updated. There are parts of it that are still valid, but there are also parts of it that have already been accomplished, and there are parts of it that can no longer be accomplished because of the way the village has changed. And I think rather than just focusing on one topic, which is called land acquisition for the purpose of parks and recreation, we need to focus on the overall needs of this village and where we want to go and what our overall priorities are. I mean, I just jotted down some things just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. We're looking at underground utilities, a $30 million plus project. We're looking at acquiring a piece of property that's important to this entire community, maybe $15 million. We're looking at a causeway authority with Dade County and the city of Miami, which we're going to have to ante up a fairly big check to have a seat at the table. And it includes, by the way, the reconstruction of Beer Cup Bridge, which is our driveway. It's vital to our existence. It's going to be a $40 million project. We're looking at a venture that could incorporate part of Virginia Key and maybe Crandon Park, which we will be able to have some say-so over what it's used for. It's going to cost us a lot of money. You add it all up, those four items alone could be $95 million. We don't have an unlimited pocketbook. We do if we want to raise taxes. If the community is willing, if our taxpayers are willing to just say, okay, we don't care what everything costs, let's just do it all. But I think in order to be prudent, in order to be fiscally responsible, in order to prioritize what our needs are from top to bottom, we need to update our vision and really understand what the most important things are for this village and where we want to spend our money first. And before we start talking about areas of it, like land acquisition, and I know that's what this meeting was supposed to be about tonight, my idea was let's start with a vision. Let's update it. Let's modernize it. Let's see where it takes us.
Thank you. That was helpful. Do we have any questions, anything to add?
We're listening. I'm listening.
Listening. Lucho?
No, I agree with Gary a lot and what he's saying. You know, I've read through the 2020 vision plan, trying to get a grasp of where we're at with respect to it, and it definitely needs for us to look at it. And I think that you had mentioned something like that, Katie, at one point about that. So I think that would be a good start, you know, in our deliberations and how to go forward with how we're going forward with the land acquisition and what type of land we want to acquire. there's some big projects there that we all know about, and some that we haven't discussed in public that are definitely going to take a significant amount of our money. And that's the big picture, and that's what I always try to focus on. So I agree 100%. I also want to hear from the land and the acquisition people. That's extremely important to me because, you know, they have put in a whole lot of time and effort and everything. So I'm more than anxious to listen to what they have to say and incorporate it all, you know, within what we're doing.
Patricia, you need to sign up, honey.
Myra, I think also one of the reasons everyone's here and we're here is we all believe that land acquisition is a priority of this vision and master plan, and that's where we're focusing tonight, mostly, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, one of the things that I think was a challenge when we discussed this initially was how do we give our land acquisition committee the tools that they need to do their job? And so that's why we tweaked the ordinance. We wanted to give you know, it's hard to discuss acquisition in the sunshine and act nimbly, and especially when it's, you know, reported in the newspaper before some of the stakeholders even know that there's a plan or a movement or an interest. And they've done such an incredible job. We didn't want to have such valuable members of our community frustrated, because it's a tough job. I mean, buying property on Key Biscayne for anyone is it's difficult. There's a demand. The price is very high. In our situation, you know, it's tax dollars. We have to be incredibly careful and weigh. You know, it's not a personal, well, that's perfect for me. We really have to be a little more, in some ways, conservative and thoughtful. So that was part of it, is how are we doing a good job? Are we giving our land acquisition committee the tools? Are they in the way that they are created? Is 9 members a good number? Do we want it to be more nimble? Do we want it to be bigger? Do we want to give a very discrete task instruction so that it's you know, I frankly, at a couple junctures where land was presented to us, really felt for the efforts that would have been put in, and to not kind of, you know, reap the rewards of your efforts. You did, but you know, I mean, it was a little bittersweet. So it's just in some ways to let everyone in our community know we value them. We certainly value our members of the Land Acquisition Committee, but it's a challenging role.
Well, I also think an important piece of this is to get a good feel of how big our community wants us to think, because based on what Gary's saying, we need some feedback from the community of how they want to progress. Everybody knows the property's expensive, so do we need how big should we be thinking, and how are we going to get that information from the constituent?
Our constituents. And we have, I think, in our documents, the different tabs show kind of the evolution of what the property of our acquisitions were, what the priorities were. The last time we surveyed the public, it was actually in this kind of satisfaction survey that was done in 2000, at the end of 2015. And, you know, top 3, third and fourth was to acquire open space for passive activity and to acquire open space for active recreation. We know that's a priority, but what's the scope? Where should we really be focusing? And as both Gary and Lucho have mentioned, you know, do we focus on the bigger, or do we focus on the smaller? So I thought your input was fabulous about taking a step back and getting more direction from our constituents and from the council. And with that, do you all have any other questions?
No,
Okay,
I'd love to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely. Let's start with Bill Stevens. Let me see.
Bill Stevens, 159 East Enid Drive. Thanks for your efforts here. I'd like to kind of build on what Gary just said. The 2020 plan seems to make a lot of sense. What I think may prove to be helpful is the council takes a list of these big projects and has three matrices outlined: the timeline, the total project cost, and the projected village contribution to that project cost, because there are grants and other federal funds available. So when we start with that map and include land acquisition in it, we can work backwards from a timeline and a budget. So I think what may be helpful for the Land Acquisition Committee is that we start quantifying, the council starts quantifying in terms of, we want to have this amount of land by this date for parks at a projected budget or village contribution of X, or a projected lease amount of X. There are two ways to acquire land, either through a purchase or through a land lease. Both options are on the table, but I think what happens is the more you can quantify the projects in terms of timeline, cost, and village contribution, the more tangible the plan is going to be. And the Land Acquisition Committee is actually going to have guidelines, quantifiable guidelines, timeline guidelines, and budget guidelines to work with over a period of time. Otherwise, we're just kind of rolling the dice and whatever pops up and it doesn't work. So I'd certainly take that 2020 plan, as Gary says, modify it, and then quantify those three areas: timeline, total project cost, and projected village contribution. I think we'll be in good shape. On a separate note, on a particular piece of property, 202 Sunrise is laying fallow right now. My wife had a chance to talk to the owner about a couple months ago, and they've postponed the development for condos because of the currency devaluation in South America and the lack of buyers and the economies down there. He told my wife he was considering redeveloping it for townhouses to sell to American buyers. So right now that property is pretty fallow. Now he purchased it for about $6.8 million, maybe rounded up to $7 million. We talked about buying it for $9.2 million, but consider a land lease. I calculated roughly, because he's renting out the property now, and it's only about 60% occupied. But I calculate the net operating income, which is the total profit to the owner without debt service of the property, right around $120,000 a year at 5% vacancy. Right now, it's at about 25-30% vacancy, I guess. And so his NOI is probably around the $100,000 a year range. I think we could potentially lease that land on a 10-year lease in the range of $80,000 to $100,000 a year. And the village could probably negotiate a portion of that payment toward a lease option purchase at the end of 10 years. So don't think you have to buy everything. Why buy when you can rent for a period of time and satisfy a need? So I'm happy to help crunch numbers with the land committee if that's on the option, but thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bill. Residents, thank you very much for coming, and if you'd like to speak, you're always welcome. It is more orderly if you'd like to fill out a form just so that I can, I don't want to miss anyone. So our next speaker is Leo Brito.
Hi, Leo Brito, 775 Curtiswood Drive. And it was following up on Stephen's comments. I want everybody to think in terms of, and I know Wyman and Franklin have done a tremendous job of keeping the Land Acquisition Committee moving forward. But I think what also we might want to start thinking about is basically when, as an attorney and an agent, I understand the dynamics of real estate. Nowadays we have to start thinking maybe of splitting the bundle of rights. And we know with the community center and the recreation department has been very successful in negotiating interlocal agreements for the use of public lands with Dade County, the school board, and so forth. And I think we really need to be looking at those ideas in terms of land that is fallow here within our community. There are several opportunities that we can look at that I'm very open to discuss about, that I think that we can reach out to these organizations that really are sitting there on properties that need upkeep. They don't have the resources, and we definitely could use them for parks and recreation during the times that they don't need them because maybe they use them for a very limited amount of time. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we might want to think about is how to really develop our land on a vertical. When we develop something, how do we develop it vertically? How do we use, if we're going to acquire the parking lot next door, how do we create a rooftop garden or a rooftop passive park that people can actually enjoy? I mean, we're getting to a point where land is so valuable that we really need to be thinking in those directions as well. And of course, obviously, we all remember, those of us who were here, 10 years ago when Vernon was, 15 years ago, Vernon was mayor, our attempts to acquire and do something in Calusa. But maybe we should revisit our relationships with the Matheson and the whole Crandon Park effort and really look at that, because part of the problem we have, as well as the state land down south and east and west, because I think part of the problem is that we're maybe too focused on identifying particular individual lots as opposed to looking at the bigger picture, parcels that are larger or more usable, and just in visualizing, just like we did the soccer field at the Mass campus, visualizing a bigger parcel where we get involved with people that actually control those lands and reaching an agreement that's mutually beneficial for both. So I think I just wanted to give those thoughts.
Thank you. Patricia Woodson.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a brief presentation. Peter in the house. HDMI cable. So thanks. There you are. You materialized.
Yep.
Great. So yes. I just have an overview, very brief overview for you of the Land Acquisition Committee's work and how we've gone about it, and to lay any fears to rest. Unprotected Wi-Fi. Very fun. Now, how do I get rid of that? Peter, help. Thanks. Anyway, yes. First, I'm going to give you a little overview of our work and how we've done it. Any fears that we have ignored, the methodology that was given to us, the planning that has been laid before all of us since before incorporation. I will put that to rest. We are a very dedicated group. I took over as chair after Frank started serving up there on the dais. And we have, over a period of years, evaluated so many properties. In the beginning, when the market was moving very fast, we would lose the opportunity before we could even bring it forward. Now things have slowed down, for better or for worse. But anyhow, I want to start out by congratulating all of us on the first park created in a generation in our community. It is beautiful. It's already full of people of all ages, babies, adults, and I hope everyone will have a chance to go to Heather and Hampton and enjoy this beautiful new park. So the question since before incorporation, in fact driving incorporation, was how will we maintain our quality of life in the face of growing population, traffic, and congestion, something we're really feeling now. Our property values, we know, depend on walkable, green, sustainable village. So we've always said to ourselves, we're built out, we're completely built out. But as we have all seen, and we know, all properties will be redeveloped. So our planning from the beginning has been long range and always needs to be long range. So the Land Acquisition Committee's mission really is in service to the council to help you identify, according to the public planning that we all share, opportunities for purchase that fit that plan, and also follow the natural flow of properties as they come on the market, which turns out to be the tricky part. The planning documents that we have used from the very beginning of the Land Acquisition Committee are voluminous, and you all have them before you, and they're online under the village, in the village website for everyone to see. the comprehensive plan, master plan, 1995, the update done by Wallace, Robertson, Todd in 2008, Vision 2020. Also, every one of these studies has been done pairing citizens with really world-class professionals. The Recreation Open Space recommendations by IBI Group in 2009, and ETC Institute statistically valid community needs assessments. We've worked with them 3 times, and we've lived their reports of citizen surveys, which are incredibly accurate. They're considered top 3 nationwide. So the consensus that we have from all of these studies is remarkably consistent. Since 1995, acquisition for land green space is top 3 priority, ranging from 52% to 67%. Since before incorporation as well, something that's turned out to be very elusive so far, a bayfront park, passive parks also, and also ball fields, another very difficult one. The summary of parks planning, the consensus around parks planning that Vision 2020 produced, was a very beautifully crafted statement, I believe written by someone present here. Maintain our small town island character by managing the scale and density of development on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. Expand our array of passive parks, open spaces, and active recreation facilities through carefully directed property acquisition and redevelopment to include small-scale neighborhood parks, a restored, protected Calusa Park, let's hope, with improved pedestrian access, additional playing fields, and bikeways and trails. Wallace, Robertson, Todd actually was one of the few, as I look back over the surveys, it was one of the few, I was kind of tiny, sorry, that actually differentiated between response from multifamily residences and single-family residences. And so the numbers here show, as would be logical, that there's a higher level of interest from multifamily housing districts as opposed to single-family, experienced as a higher need. Our last citizen needs survey in 2015 showed, as always, 2/3 of residents want more land for parks, 69% use parks, 31% prefer sports fields. Passive park space has the highest level of all park use, 69%. That was a little bit of a different wrinkle for us in this last survey. It was a bit of a shift from wanting primarily active space to really seeing the emergence of a bit of a preference for passive space. But medium parks with both passive and active use had the highest rating when you combine lack of objection and agreement. And here's just a visual of that same report, seeing agree and strongly agree in blue. And more than 50% supporting open space for passive activities, active recreation, and acquisition development of pocket parks within the community, which echoes the vision plan, the comp plan, to integrate parks throughout the community. And the community center, has emerged in our recent studies to occupy spaces 1 through 3, followed by parks for active and passive recreation. And here is their graph showing the top priorities, which all contain parks, as well as the community center. So prior to this new park that we just started enjoying this past weekend, 530 Crandon was purchased not strictly for the purpose of a park, but as part of the Civic Center to be used. I mean, probably 10 uses have been proposed for this, from theater to, who knows, a dog park, among other things. It's still there waiting for a final determined use. And since we bought that in 2002, growing at about 4.7% a year without new residential units, we are now close to the density of Chicago. And that is not good news. This, of course, is wonderful news, and this new park represents another piece of the puzzle in our network of spaces that encourage people to walk and really incentivize walking instead of driving. The other thing that has been an ongoing challenge is ball fields. And over time, and we can see this in the citizen survey results, over time, the expressed need for ball fields within the village has been a bit pushed out by the need for parks that are passive integrated in our community. Increased density, I think we're seeing elevated interest in quiet enjoyment. So we may be at a point where we're really looking at ball fields outside of our boundaries. Assembling dozens of acres within the village is more and more difficult to imagine achieving. And yet, it's really parks within our boundaries that improve our quality of life and protect our property values by really making this a less congested, less car-dependent, green community. Also, parks serve to reduce population density, a primary cause for the community to incorporate. Best practices have been a part of what the Land Acquisition Committee has studied, along with the public planning we've accumulated since the beginning. So those best practices, according to the Trust for Public Lands, the Urban Institute, and most urban planning organizations, are to place parks where the people need them most. Prioritize high-density neighborhoods over low-density. Young families, children, and older adults are the most frequent users of parks, so concentrate parks in those neighborhoods. Create a walkable community by placing green spaces within approximately 5-minute walks of each other, which has been statistically shown to shift behavior from driving to walking. And design and locate parks for climate change resiliency, to retain water in case of flooding. This is something that is really about to sweep all coastal communities in the United States as a use for parks, for drainage, and sometimes for water retention. These are the criteria that the committee has used to evaluate recommendations. So the first example is our process for Heather and Hampton. Would the location serve the greatest number of people? In this case, in this neighborhood of single-family homes, yes. It's centrally located on a corner lot in the middle of the single-family district, really dead center on an artery road. Would residential density be reduced by development as a park? Yes, about a 9,000 square foot lot suitable for a 5+ bedroom home. Bayfront property, no. Potential extension of green space, no. Existing green space, no. Can the property serve multiple purposes? Yes. Passive garden plus small open space for exercise and creative play. Active and passive combined use is top ranked. Passive use alone was ranked second. Is the property location and use compatible with neighbors? Yes. Is the property able to serve an unmet need in a neighborhood? Yes. In unprogrammed space and nature parks are really not present in the single-family district. What is the relationship to the nearest park and their use? So the Village Green is within a 5-minute walk, providing the active program park. It's walkable, pedestrian. And as always, the cost is negotiable. We do look at asking price. If it's been way out of the ballpark, sometimes we put it aside, unless it's been extraordinarily important. Our other recommendation was for a potential park in the Garden District, and here's a window and our thinking behind that. Would the location serve the greatest number of people? Yes. central to a neighborhood of approximately 2,000 residents within 4 blocks. Would residential density be reduced by redevelopment as a park? Yes, 11 current units, in that case, potentially triple number of residents when redeveloped. Obviously not a bayfront, not an extension of existing green space, but the highest ranked use, active and passive combined, was possible. The property location was compatible with the neighborhood. Is the property available to serve unmet need? Yes, on the other side of Crandon from where we are now, there's no combination active-passive park, for example, with a playground potentially or other active use on that side of Crandon. And what is the relationship to the nearest parks? Walkable, 5 minutes within neighborhood and 5 minutes from other parks. So moving forward, we have an excellent, professionally guided bunch of planning under our belts. And it's given us the same messages for 25 years. So we just need to continue the good work. And looking forward, we have seen, especially in the ETC Institute report, a call for development of parks that really give us a pedestrian-friendly network of parks. Traffic was emerged as the #1 concern of all residents in that citizen survey. And the president of ETC Institute ended his presentation to us with a warning that if we didn't deal with our traffic and congestion, that he didn't want to come back and see a negative impact on our property values. So parks are a major tool for changing behavior in a community from car dependent to walking. So to reduce traffic and land needed for parking as well, parks make a major contribution. And they can improve our resiliency to climate change. Some of you might be familiar with the Walk Score, which is used as a large-scale, it's a public access walkability index that's used by many realtors to recommend and evaluate communities and properties. You can see we're doing very well in all categories, but parks are there in the red, down at the bottom. Clearly, that's the area of improvement, according to Walk Score. We are considered very walkable, but we have the potential to be a walker's paradise. Millennials in particular have been shown to be 12% more likely to value walking than previous generations. Pedestrian-friendly communities, which has always been our stated goal, who want to become more pedestrian and reduce traffic, create necklaces of green spaces, necklaces of parks within 5 to 10 minute walks, and add public transportation, as we're doing. A walking circuit of green spaces also improves health. The CDC has measured this. And also creates greater community connection and social capital. Reduces lifestyle-induced illnesses like obesity and diabetes. A carefully planned, small, mid-sized group of parks definitely can equal more than one big park as an impact in the community, reducing traffic and improving health. The Trust for Public Lands does this kind of GIS study, and their guidelines, summarized at the bottom, 50% of their points accorded for park locations are determined by population density. 25% looking for ages 19 and younger. This is an example of a green network developed in a community about our size. You can see how it creates walkability. Of course, New York City is in a general panic, and their plans at another sea level island are just fascinating to look at. So I'll conclude with some suggestions that have emerged from countless meetings. Our #1 suggestion is to create a walkable network of parks and green corridors throughout the village, along with additional local public transportation. Ultimately, to avoid needing parking in this network of parks. Remain ready to acquire top priority properties for sale, such as bayfront and sites in high-density neighborhoods. Replenish the land trust fund by financing purchases, and also applying for matching funds and grants. The Trust for Public Lands is eager to be our partner. Partner with Dade County and organizations to locate and design parks for resiliency to sea level rise. Their engineering study includes us. Seek creative solutions such as flat green roofs for recreation space. Engage the Trust for Public Lands and potentially others for professional guidance. And update Vision 2020, which I think is very, very important. It's the holistic view of all of our capital improvements, including and integrating parks. Here's just a shot of a half-acre at Battery Park. It has an incredible feeling and impact, even though it's very small. And so that's us. And then I'd like to turn the mic over, if I might, to Alan, who has a very brief presentation on Vision 2020.
Alan, do you mind if we have a couple other people who've been waiting, and then I'm just trying to integrate the...
Whatever you want.
Okay, I'll leave your slides are next.
Okay. I didn't realize it was part of the presentation. I thought you were so... Please come forward, Alan. I didn't realize that it was...
Can I ask, Pat,
Yes.
could I ask you a question before you go? The slide that you showed that had the study that broke down the data between single-family homes and... Which one was that? What year was that?
2009.
Thank you. Because presumably now it would be even more response from the
everything-
multifamily because there's probably more year-round residents in them.
Yeah, every
Since
time we do a
2009.
study, we just see more and more.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Hi, Alan.
Hi, thanks for having Alan Fine, 525 Allendale. Thanks for hosting this. I thought I had been asked to come just because I had been on both the 2020 committee and on the land acquisition committee to kind of provide some context, specifically with regard to what we did on the 2020 committee. And it might be helpful to give some historical context to that because, and I'll do that in kind of political terms because it's kind of an interesting discussion about political philosophy when brought down to various levels of government. I think when I first moved to Key Biscayne, the citizens of Key Biscayne were relatively homogeneous, relatively conservative in their politics, but at the same time, it became clear over the first few years I lived here, I moved here in 1979, that there was a great feeling that really transcended liberal conservative politics, which was that we were all victims of taxation without representation, which of course led to our ultimate incorporation. And I think over the first few years that we, even when we were incorporated, there was still a philosophical battle going on between folks who thought that government was bad and wasteful and lazy and incompetent and stupid, and those that thought, people on the far left who thought that government at all levels was great and we should have central planning coming from Washington, D.C., and that was great. But in the middle, I found over the years, and it came to fore in the 2020 committee, was that the great middle, the 25 to 75% of the people kind of believe that government has a role and government spending can be a good thing when it's being done at the most local level. So there were always people that continued to say, don't build a rec center, don't get the village green, government will screw it up, just let the markets do whatever they want to do. We don't need our own fire department, we don't need any of that. And all that stuff turned out to be pretty good ideas. And then when we had the 2020 Vision Committee, it was being led by Eddie Easton, who's a fairly conservative Republican, and me.
You don't have to say that with such a nasty tone of voice.
No,
Republican.
I don't mean it, because it's like the fathers of incorporation. We had among others, Gary and Gene. From a federal government point of view, different points of view. But in terms of spending money at the local level to create the best community we can, to create a neighborhood with scale, but by the same token, develop in a way that makes sense, it's something we could all agree on. So there was extremely little rancor or disagreement about what this community needed to do. Ed recommended just one of the great urban planners in the country, came from Sausalito and led our discussion, and it was an extremely well thought out and as objective a survey as we possibly could take of various views, and we came to a remarkably clear consensus on what needed to be done. And hopefully, do I just hit this? There we go. So we talked about a number of various things. Actually, one of the things that we talked about that we really haven't been able to accomplish is some kind of a bay access park. That it was pretty clear consensus that would be a good idea. That we all had access to the ocean. Not everybody who lived on Key Biscayne who didn't belong to the yacht club had access to the bay. For those of us who have been here for a long time, we know that back in the day, we would all hang out at Mashta Point, and it would be like Mallory Square at sunset. We would all sit out there and drink and do all the things that were done in those times and enjoy the sunsets on Key Biscayne. And, unfortunately, it was private land, and ultimately we all got kicked out. But we've never been able to replicate anything like that. So that was one of the things that we talked about that didn't come to fruition. We had a large section in our vision plan about neighborhood scale and mini parks, and as Pat pointed out, that is coming to fruition, or as at least our first foray was a good one. Our idea, by the way, was, let's start out with something bite-sized and see if we can make it work. And the first thing we did was we walked around and talked to all the neighbors who lived around there, because when we had earlier gone in to try to find a lot on Harbor, the neighbors on Harbor were very, very resistant to that. So in this case, no resistance from the neighbors, and it looks like it's going to be a success. Good idea. So what I wanted to do was to talk to you about, there were 2 or 3 pages in the 2020 plan where we, after going through this fairly objective ranking process, we had various groups of things that we all kind of agreed needed to be done. And the most important ones were in group 1. On the screen now, the ones that have to do with land acquisition specifically are in green, but I think based on Gary's comments and Luis's comments, it makes sense to talk about all of them a little bit. I won't be long. The infrastructure upgrades we've been dealing with we've been talking about forever, and this was among the highest ranked projects that the 2020 Vision Committee talked about, along with stormwater drainage. Now, when we talk about updating, I know we've all been spending some time looking at what's gone on Miami Beach. There may be a need to raise our streets, which ironically might make the cost of burying our utilities less rather than more, because we could raise the streets and bury the utilities at the same time. Obviously, we did tackle, or at least began to tackle the stormwater drainage issues, which is good. Going down the list, we are slowly coming to a conclusion on 560 Crandon Boulevard, educational high school on Virginia Key, check, and that actually now creates more possible projects, because that's been such a success, as we've seen not only with regard to the high school, but the playing field. And I've been here talking to you on other occasions about the opportunities to take that idea and make it work with regard to more gym facilities and a theater at the Mast Academy, where we can have similar relationships with the school board. Frank and I have been tasked to work with the school board on that, and I have not done enough to make that happen, and I hope to get to work on that. With regard to expanded access to the Bay and Beach, we did talk about the Bay project. We did talk about the need for community parks and playing fields. We looked at the Presbyterian Church, and we've still been talking to them over the years about, with the elders over there, about some kind of, as someone earlier mentioned, renting some space over there to create playing fields. But importantly, we also talked about Calusa Park, improving Calusa Park, and expanding Calusa Park. And for a long time, that looked like we were butting up against issues that might not be movable. Maybe those will be movable. But what we did do was we had, in this plan, we had the foresight that's been acted upon to create the pathway from the village to Calusa Park. So that's there. And hopefully we can make some hay in that area. We talked about at the top of this page, neighborhood park, short interior street road demolition, trees, grass, benches, pedestrian scale lights, village green lighting. We've talked about that in this plan. On the street enhancements, we talk about decent lighting for the village as a whole. I think the lighting on the village green has been a home run along Harbor Drive has been a home run. Unfortunately, through most of the rest of the Mackle area, we have street lighting that is the exact same street lighting you would have in our poorest communities in this village, along with the high-density orange street lights that could not be less inviting. I feel strongly about doing something about that. But the fact is, when you look at what we recommended as a whole, we've acted on a lot of these things. We recommended opening up Fernwood to golf cart and pedestrian traffic. We've done that. We talked about some kind of a bus system, and just in the last year or two, it looks like our golf cart system is a big success and a step in the right direction. But in my view, wearing my 2020 vision hat, I would say There's still work to be done. I think there are a lot of potential projects that could answer all of the remaining issues. And of course, we can take care of the rising seas to the best we can in our little boat on the ocean, in a way that could also make it easier to bury our utilities. So the work is there. With regard to whether or not the Land Acquisition Committee is a good idea or a bad idea, I can tell you there is no easy way to hash out all these projects and potential projects completely in the sunshine, and I don't know if there's an easy answer. All I can tell you is that we're there to help.
Thank you.
If you want us to help, and if you want to take it over, that's fine too. But I think in the next 3 or 4 months, we might have some real opportunities to act nimbly and make all these projects go forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Antonio Camejo.
Good evening. Tony Camejo, 151 Crandon Boulevard.
Yes.
What?
We've got the peanut gallery back there. Yes, sir. Nice to see you.
First, I want to congratulate the committee and the tremendous work that they've done. A huge amount of years of looking at possibilities to improve the community, looking at various aspects of what we need to improve a community that was never planned in the first place, just developed haphazardly and over time. And the Village Council has done and the people of the corporation did an incredible job to try to piece together the best possible solutions given the resources at the time and so on. But I want to point out a couple of things. One, there's an area that really hasn't been addressed, and that is a reality that exists, and that is we have more than 50% of the population living on the east side, pretty much of Crandon, in condominiums that are planned communities. And those planned communities have probably roughly 20 acres of green space already in them. And I certainly appreciate the fact that the single-family homes do not have the same benefits because they were not planned communities. And now, retroactively, we're trying to improve the availability of green space in that part of the community. And I think that's a laudable goal. How that's to be funded is another question. And that I think we need to look at. Every time a pocket park is purchased in the single-family home areas, 50% of the funds come from the condominiums that already have 20 acres of green space that they've paid for. So that's something to consider. I think it's a wonderful idea that Alan brought up of having access to the bay. I think that's a laudable goal that the entire community should support in one way or the other. I think the key point that was made by Gary Gross is that we need to revisit all of this work that was done, have a comprehensive plan so that we understand what we're talking about. If we're talking about parks every 5 minutes, how many parks is that? What is the cost of that? We don't have those numbers unless perhaps you have all those numbers. That's a lot of green area, that's a lot of parks. Is that the best use of our money? For example, could the village cut a deal with the state and give free access to every resident of Key Biscayne to Bill Baggs Park? So that becomes our park, that every resident can go and bicycle there at any time, go in and out, and have access to to the bay, have access to, the beaches, to beautiful green areas, wild, very wild and very nice. So there are a lot of things that we can explore. We have a huge amount of land on both sides of us that are parks all around us. I agree that it would be wonderful to have a lot of pocket parks around, perhaps in the single-family home areas. That might be a great local project for the single-family home to have a special fund to create those kind of parks. The idea is not a bad idea, but in a comprehensive master plan, we can really take a look at what we need to do so that everybody benefits from the various ideas that are being put forward. The other thing to consider, obviously, is every time we take out a house, we are eliminating revenues and creating an expense. And that's going to affect our tax base. That's going to affect the revenues to the village. And that has to be factored in as well. Let's see what the other... Yeah, the other thing in terms of green spaces, for a long time in the village we talked about concurrency. And just for the record, I think we all understand and agree that the village of Key Biscayne fully meets concurrency according to the state regulations. Because we're allowed to count a percentage of the green spaces in the condominium area as part of meeting that requirement for green space. So, and I say this because we shouldn't use that as the criteria for why we need to have pocket parks. We should look at the things that we're proposing on their own merits, not because of anything else other than the importance of having more green space. And then again, the big areas are playing fields, and I think the village is approaching that from a very intelligent point of view, which is to negotiate with the existing lands on Virginia Key and so on, where we can cut partnerships with other government entities to get those things. So again, to summarize, I think we need to revisit the master plan. We need to have a really updated, comprehensive plan so that if we decide that we need 20 pocket parks, we plan for that, we fund it, and we figure out how we're going to pay for it. But right now what we're doing is I think the worst thing, which is ad hoc. A piece of land comes up, we go grab it without any kind of comprehensive understanding of the interplay between one piece of land and another. We have our schools, we have the community center. Does it make more sense to be acquiring property adjacent to our school so that we can expand facilities and so on going into the future? So all of these things need to be looked at. And despite the fact that a lot of excellent work was done in the past, I think we can improve upon that, add to what has been done. But I would be in favor of holding off on any new purchase of property until that review of the master plan in place, and then we can move forward with a much better understanding of what we need.
Thank you. Mr. Helfman, just a point of clarification, because my understanding is concurrency under the state formula, which was a statute. We do not meet it, correct?
We do not yet meet the concurrency standard that we have established in this town, in this village for ourselves. He's referring to a provision in the Dade County Code which allows for planned communities who have a portion of their property set aside for recreation space. If and when they're developed, the developer can count that portion of his development towards concurrency if he needs to do that, if there's a lack of public parks in the area.
Okay, thank you.
And we chose not to do that and also chose not to include the beach.
Correct.
But that was our choice.
Yes, well, we could certainly make up, if you want to, public space and call whatever we want that's green public space. That's not the standard that we chose. Some communities take the swale in their communities and count the green swale. We didn't do that. So I think the goal was to establish usable space that really served a recreation purpose in coming up with the standard that we
Okay.
did.
And our next speaker is Landy Ibarra. Landy Ibarra. I'm sorry, there were some speakers who have.
I think she left.
Yeah, we have about 4 or 5 people who had to leave. Arlene Nicholson.
Yes, Ellie Nicholson, 769 Allendale Road. I'm kind of an ad hoc member of the Land Acquisition Committee, and primarily I just want to emphasize the phenomenal job that particular committee has done. Creating neighborhood parks within 5-minute walk of each other, of course, would be wonderful, probably slightly impractical. But the idea of putting everything on the table until we come up with this grand plan, while pieces of property come up that fit into our original 2020 plan, who knows how long it's going to take. It'll probably take at least a year to come up with any kind of comprehensive plan. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, properties come and go. Also, in terms of the east side of Crandon Boulevard, perhaps the big fancy dancy condominiums have all of the property and green space they need. I don't know. I don't go inside. But I do know that Fernwood and Galen and East Enid do not have any green space to speak of. And I believe that the property on Sunrise is a high priority and should be acted on as soon as possible. Simply because it's would serve such a phenomenal purpose for a huge number of people. Plus, it keeps that many people out of cars, adding to the traffic. And if anyone were to ask me, I will take green space over green money any day. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudine Cotto.
I'll be brief. Well, first, I'd like to say that I live 2 houses down from the
Claudine,
Hampton.
can you state your name and address for
I'm
the
sorry.
record, please?
Claudine Cotto, 375 Hampton Lane.
Thank you.
And I live 2 houses down from the Hampton Lane Park, and I can say that over the last couple of days, just walking by there all the time, that it's been used and everyone's really happy about it. Hopefully it doesn't get to be crazy, but there's some hesitation, but everyone's very happy around the park. My overall, commentary was, I understand that the Land Acquisition Committee is focused on park and recreation, and I know there's work being done on sustainable energy, but I just would ask that there be consideration in terms of functional use of our Land Trust Committee to consider sustainable energy, solar power, and so forth. I know there's initiatives underway, but I don't know if it's part of being a revision to the 2020 plan, or just really thinking about, we have an opportunity to be a model community for South Florida, and taking charge of the government buildings to be solar power and so forth is, I think, it should be a priority for us.
Thank you. Great suggestion. Thank you. Our next speaker is Maria Luisa Tinoco. Maria Luisa?
Good evening. I'm Maria Luisa Tinoco, 166 Harbor Drive. I'm the listing agent for the property in 571 Glenridge, Nancy's house. And although I have sent the village because I knew before you were in some negotiation with the property, we list this property, and although if you buy it, I'm not in the deal. I do believe it's for the location of these 2 properties, 571 Glenridge, and the other that is also, I understand, on a possibility in the back is 570 Fernwood, I believe. This between the school and the village, I believe, are the location very important for the community to have. And 3 reasons why I may suggest this a good time is because they went down. The prices at this point, they went down from 2015, so they are going to get a good price. It could be, I do believe that maybe not for a park like other parks, but I suggest it will be great to have there something like in other communities. It's a community garden, vegetable garden, which teach kids from the school and the elderly could be integrated also in that activity that I think is another thing that we don't have in this village. And I do believe we should teach our kids to grow vegetables in this. And the elderly are always usually they love to be part of this kind of activity. So that was my suggestion, that I do believe there is an opportunity to buy. And once, if you don't buy it now because there are other priorities, I understand, but that location, they are going to build another big house, and that it will lose the connection between school and now there are like 4 in that area. But these 2 are like an alley between the village and the school that I think is very important if you plan to buy something. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Patricia Romano.
Good evening, Patricia Romano, 361 Beechwood Drive. I've been in this place as long as you have been here. And I've been working on the Land Acquisition Committee as long as Frank has been working in the Land Acquisition Committee. I don't remember that we have, our goal was to negotiate any big pieces of land on the other side of the bridge or anything like that. And believe me, I've been going to those meetings almost every week. Our goal was to find green space in Key Biscayne. I sell real estate, and when I sell to my buyers, I tell them, you are buying a small lot with an island included. But if an island is full of concrete, it's not an island anymore. So that's why we need all these little pieces of breathing space. I know what Mr. Gross says, all the other projects that we need, but they have to go hand in hand because like they were saying here, the lots come and go. You won't have those opportunities anymore. And we have missed many of them. So that's the reason why in the Land Acquisition Committee, we were always looking at what's in the market, what deal could be made to be presented to you through the manager. And finally, we have one goal. I mean, many strikeouts, but that's okay. That's life. And in reference to what Tony says of the condominiums and the money spent, only 3 big condominiums have green space: Key Colony, Grand Bay, and Ocean Club. All the rest of the condominiums, they all need the green space, like the Village Green and all the other things that we offer in this village. So that shouldn't be, a detriment to acquire more land. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Christina Bracken.
Thank you. My name is Christina Bracken, 224 West Mashta Drive. First, I want to thank everybody on the 2020 Committee and Land Acquisition Committee for all the work they've done. This is kind of a new thing for me, so I only have 3 very quick questions. First, 2020 vision, is that a finite project, or is there something that goes beyond 2020? Other than, you suggesting that we should think about it.
It was a guideline, and that's why I suggested, since it's 11 years old and only 3 years till 2020, we should look to update it and modify it to the extent the needs of our community have changed. So it's a living document. It's not stagnant.
so that was really my main question. The second one is there anywhere in those documents a provision or the idea of an assisted living facility on the quay? Has that ever been suggested or brought up? No. Okay. And then a much more trivial thing, I mean, the street lights, especially, I don't know whether they're the same everywhere, but on our street, 224 West Masher Drive, West Masher Drive, they're like super bright. Someone has suggested that they are able to turn them further, like downward or in any direction, so they're not lighting up people's living rooms.
Are these the ones on the poles, or on the
Yeah,
black
on the-
poles, or
yeah, on the black poles.
the new ones?
Yeah. Does anybody know?
We'll check.
Okay.
We'll check on that. Thank you for the
Thank
heads up.
you.
Our next speaker is Brett and Steve Simon. So each of you have a minute and a half? Steve, you shouldn't have laughed. In the meantime, while they're setting up, I did receive a text message from Mary Jo Pinedo. She wanted me to read it into the record. She is a member of the Land Acquisition Committee, and it reads, "Good evening. Circumstances have prevented me from attending the workshop tonight. The community has been engaging, and I hope for the best results this evening. I agree with your suggestion our committees should have a turnover or addition of individuals to keep up with the pace of the change of our community. As a suggestion, every 4 years, change 1/3 of the committee members, and each year add one new member up to a set maximum. Kind regards, Mary Jo Pinedo."
Workshop for land acquisition. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to come?
602.
Oh, did you get another one?
Well, there were some sent to all of us,
602,
emails.
I think that's the one. Okay. Yeah. Can you, is that full screen?
This one was specifically not as part of. Okay, this one was specific. Do we have another speaker who would like to?
I think they're ready.
Oh, you're ready? Perfect. I'm sorry. I was just trying to be efficient. I know, and we lost some audience members as well. But you're very important. We're diligently paying attention, Steve.
Okay. So, Steve Simon and
Brett Simon,
335 Harbor Lane. So we're going to talk about some things that have come before the Land Acquisition Committee and other things which have not, because clearly we're hearing from the audience that there are multiple issues that people want addressed, and in a 1 square mile community, it's hard to try to solve one problem without looking at things from a global perspective. So in this first slide, we have some areas on the map that we're going to talk about that have to do with potential land acquisition, and also right in the center you can see we have the one area at Hampton Heather, which we've labeled land acquisition success.
Yay.
Now, I want to address up front this the potential for something that could be very divisive in this community, and that is hearing that there should be a divide between the east and the west side of Crandon Boulevard. In 2014, Amendment 1 to the Florida Constitution went before the voters. And if you look at the data here, when we were able to divide the precincts between the east and west side of Crandon Boulevard, precinct 50 and 51, you can see that in that general election, over 81% of Key Biscayne voters, regardless of whether they lived in the predominantly high-rise precinct east of Crandon Boulevard or in the single-family home precinct west of Crandon Boulevard, approved Amendment 1 to the Florida Constitution, signaling their overwhelming support to spend governmental money to acquire outdoor recreational land. That's point one. Point two, We have had, at our land acquisition committee, we've had people come from the other side of Crandon Boulevard specifically to help give us support towards acquiring land. And I remember a couple coming, advocating when the acquisition of Bayfront property. The park that just opened a few days ago, which I still like to call Corner Park, there were some ladies walking by. They said, oh, we live in the condos. We live in Grand Bay. We're so thrilled to know this is here. We're walking by, and we're really enjoying it. So, again, we are one community, and I really want to emphasize that. I'm not going to go through these statistics that Pat and others have shown before, showing that the broad support for active recreational and passive recreational space. So let's start with something which has been near and dear to me, to many of the people here, and that's the quest for a Bay Park. That quest really predates incorporation. Alan, Pat talked about how it's a component of the 2020 Vision Study. The Village Council, Frank, talked about how in 2007 we had a majority vote. We had a 4-3 vote. Looking around for the person who didn't give us that extra vote, but he's left the room. So a majority of the council voted to purchase 200 Harbor Drive. The Land Acquisition Committee in 2015 voted unanimously to recommend to council, that's our role, we recommend to council to purchase 210 Harbor Drive. We also recommended to council to purchase 200 Harbor Drive. Those are the first two homes immediately adjacent to the yacht club, the Weaver property of the yacht club. In 2016, there was a resolution on the part of the Land Acquisition Committee to, again, acquire land.
This is an excerpt from a letter written to my grandfather, Mort Freed, and it says that the most serious is the fact that the community and the county have permitted 121 homes to blank out view and use of the bayfront. This must be opened up to permit multiple point access and a necessary offshore boardwalk to which small sailboats and canoes can be moored, and entire bay become a playground for this community. It will certainly open up the feeling of freedom and joy for those who use the bay. And this letter was written in 1992.
And Mort, for those of you who don't know your history, was on that first council. Alan showed this slide earlier. This is just a prototype view of a bay access park. And this is the language of the resolution that the Land Acquisition Committee passed and requested that the Village Council hold a public hearing on, and we didn't have a public hearing on. We're going to get to another parcel, 202 Sunrise, in our presentation, again, that didn't see the light of day in a public hearing in this room. So it's a bit exasperating to work on something and not get full public input on. This is a picture of the bay showing both sides of the yacht club. Really, well, I don't have a pointer, but on your left, it really shows 200 Harbor Drive, and there's a distance measure there. And one thing that you notice immediately, and Brett has told me from urban planning, is that if something is easy, accessible, it's visible, people will use it. It certainly is true if you go and stand at the corner of Heather and Hampton, people walk by on the sidewalk, it takes exactly one step and you're in the park. And I mention this here because if you have a park along the bay where there's a home, you'll get easy access to that park. On the other hand, over the years, there has been discussions with various members of the council going back to having a bay access point within the back of the Presbyterian Church. The Presbyterian Church would represent a great negotiation if something can be worked out with the parking lot and that land could be joined with St. Agnes and you would have an enlarged field. However, if you're going to consider the back part of that church as a bay access point, I think that defies urban planning. It is 700 to 750 feet back off the street. And I ask, when you're going there to watch a sunset and it is dusk, what single woman is going to go through a parking lot behind a church any building, behind any building, and go to the bay, watch the sunset, and then after dark, walk out. It will not get used. It is not practical. It does not fulfill the 2020 vision, in my view. It does not fulfill our desire for a bayfront park. Next area we're going to look at, Brett.
So another area with land acquisition potential is the Garden District. And as has been mentioned, we've been 202 Sunrise has come up for discussion, but unfortunately never made it to a public hearing. So this slide shows a survey of 202 Sunrise, and on this property, it's the size of approximately 4 standard Mackle lots, which is it's 29,700 square feet. So you can fit quite a bit on this property. This slide shows an example of the U.S. soccer standards for a mini field. And this is an example of something that we have been looking at that would fit on the property on Sunrise. And so Sunrise, the Sunrise property can actually, it can fit, well, this is a design sketch, which shows that it can fit actually a few fields according to those U.S. soccer standards. It can fit 2 of those mini fields, and it can fit 1 larger field, a development size, and that can fit up to 7 versus 7 kids. And in this park, you can also fit a playground, passive green space. In this sketch, there's an example of picnic areas, an edible garden, butterfly garden, some paved covered space, a central shaded alley. And on either end of the park, buffering it from its neighboring buildings, are water features. And we've been looking at Paley Park in New York City as inspiration for this.
That's pretty.
Paley Park is a pocket park in Manhattan, and the water helps screen out the noise from the surrounding urban area. And then these next slides present some alternatives of Sunrise. This was another sketch showing that the street could actually be bumped out, increasing the amount of usable green space on the property, and also this would also act as a traffic calming device.
It's great when you have someone at home who can sketch.
Show that slide again. How much space do you gain by doing that? Do you know?
Sorry.
By moving the street out?
Probably usable space, probably about another 20 feet. But it does allow, what this allows you to do, if you're very interested in putting regulation-sized fields on this property, for the mini soccer field and the development field, this allows you to actually put the full regulation size. But if you don't bump the street out, then you can only fit 2 of the mini parks, but not the development size.
Thank you.
So now we're going to look at a number of parcels that, as this presentation continues, you'll see how these come together. We're going to look in the Civic Center area and the K-8 Center. And let me just make a comment in general about playing fields. I know that when you're looking for great amounts of space, obviously that's not going to happen within the municipal boundaries. But the reality of it is, for those of us who have watched our kids and coached our kids in youth sports, proximity is really a key element. Most of the kids who participate are not super athletes and super competitive, and their families want an activity for them to participate in. So while I admire and encourage, of course, the council to work on solutions outside the boundaries, it will never change, in my opinion, the importance of having playing fields within the municipal boundaries. So we're going to continue on with this area that you see on the map. And Brett and I developed a list of unmet needs. Some of them have been spoken about by other people here this evening, but we'll go through the list: ball fields and outdoor recreational space, parking, which is currently being looked at in the Civic Center area parking, of course. That's what this slide is talking about. Others have talked about the need eventually for a state-of-the-art school. Someone tonight made a comment about an assisted living facility, which we have heard repeatedly as well. Surveys have shown that in addition to the single gymnasium in the community center, there's a need for a second gymnasium. And of course, there's always been a hope or a wish for an auditorium or a performing arts center. So we looked at all these unmet needs, and we decided to look at potential locations in this area to see what we could come up with in terms of solutions. So that's really what this graph shows. And just to point out, the reason that there's an A and a B here is that as Brett and I were kicking things back and forth, we agreed on the overall programming in terms of things that we wanted to solve. We each have a slightly different solution. So A is for me, I think Brett put it in there, A is for age and B is for either Brett or beauty. I'm not sure which, but so we'll go through these. Going back to 1998, the Village Council at that time, shortly after we had a playing fields workshop, had passed a series of resolutions. And this one, Resolution 9825, directed the village manager to enter into negotiations with the property owners on that group of 8. So Maria, that block, which at that time was simply 8 property owners, the village manager entered into discussions, and as we all know, nothing came at that time of purchasing those homes. But it is not a new idea. It is a long-standing idea to try to acquire that parcel. And specifically, if you now take a screenshot of, this is from Zillow, we know that the corner of McIntyre and Fernwood, as of last June, when the mayor and council had that up for discussion, that doesn't show as a red dot here, but you can see that if that's included, you have 5 red dots on this parcel at the moment. So we're going to talk about what could happen over time. And I think the key thing here, that was back in 1998, and here we are 19 years later, and nothing's going to happen overnight. If you begin to acquire these parcels and set a policy that over time you will acquire all of those parcels, then we can talk about what can be done with that, and we will, as those parcels get joined. We also have something that we want to present as an interim use for those properties, and also to address one of the other needs in the Civic Center area.
So this slide shows a sketch of taking 2 of those houses along West McIntyre and turning them into a parking lot. And this would alleviate the parking issue that the village has, and also avoiding a much more expensive structure of a parking garage, and allowing the land that would go to be put to a better use in the future. And so these 2 lots together actually allow for up to 44 parking spaces, and with green space included along both edges, so that it would be buffered both from the houses across of West McIntyre and the houses right next door in that same block.
And we're going to come back to the amount of money that's involved at the end of the presentation, but from the budget hearing, this slide's from the budget hearing, and just to talk about the amount of money that's at stake here, the parking garage that is, while it says the money is to be determined, it says the projected cost is nearly $6 million, $5.98 million, that it would otherwise go into a parking garage structure. On this slide,
I'm sorry, that includes the structure itself on
this line item? This is the building, it's the line item, Village Hall Parking Garage Construction.
Okay, so it includes the a proposed structure, if that's what we're.
I mean, it's in the line item on the budget. I'm.
Okay.
Right. I'm not sure this slide projects very well, but on the left, just to show you again, we've been talking about human behavior and proximity. And here on the left side, we can show the distance to the community center if you were to approach it from surface parking in this block of 8 area versus approaching it from the parking garage. And in fact, if you read Mr. Corradino's report on the parking garage, he talks about using the first level of the parking garage for police, the second level for village employees, and the third level for village residents. I think that it is, as much as the ETC Institute study talked about a need for community center parking rather than civic center area parking, I think it is very unlikely that people are going to drive to the third floor of a parking garage, go down, and walk over to the community center. I also think that given the trend towards a more pedestrian-friendly community and the millennials like this young man to my left, I think that by the time you have this parking garage, it's going to be a white elephant.
Agreed.
This is where now we're going to present some common areas and you'll see where we differ a little bit. This is solution A. For each of us, what is in common is that over time, the entire K-8 center, except for the newest building, would become green space. We're going to talk about where a new school, state-of-the-art school, would go. The one building that would be preserved has the blue rectangle around it. That's a 77,000 square foot building that's the newest building. So in solution A's suggestion as to where the school would go, we would take that parking garage site, the police site. We would also involve a private parcel across from that. And we would involve the air rights that go across these two streets that are on West Enid and on Village Greenway. So obviously you'd have to build up. You'd have underground parking, you'd have surface parking, you'd have a school, and on top of the school, and in the school you'd also have a gymnasium and an auditorium/performing arts center. And on top of that, on the roof, you would have playing fields. So really, we're talking about creating green space playing fields out of thin air. Now, obviously, the kids aren't going to move out of that school, out of the existing school, until the new school is built. Once it is built, you can then remove these buildings that are on the property of the school, create green space. Over time, now you're acquiring that block of 8. Once it's fully acquired, you can close that segment of Glenridge that's in common between that block of 8 and the school, and you now have a larger parcel for your green space. And just to show you what we're talking about, this is a slightly different way of showing it. This building number 6 in the lower right is the building that would be preserved. That building, as I said, has 77,000 square feet. It has 33 spaces in it. And so what are we thinking about using that building for? Well, we're thinking about using that building for an assisted living facility. Because I think that if you really are going to think on a level that's going to accommodate the needs of the members of this community, you can't be thinking small. You need to be thinking on a much larger scale. You're going to have staff that's going to be coming there. They're going to need parking underneath. You're going to have a building that meets fire codes and is state-of-the-art from that point of view. You have a cafeteria facility that's already here. You have multiple spaces here that can be used for such a structure. And frankly, I don't know where else you're going to get that size of a building and that much space anywhere else in this community. Okay, so then this slide shows there's a line here. Once you do join these properties, it shows you just how large of an expanse of green space you can have between the block of 8 and the school property. Okay. Brett will present solution B.
So my solution is to put the school elsewhere. I guess I'll show you on this slide first. I I outlined the 530 lot and the SunTrust lot in red because I think that is a good solution for moving the school and thereby opening up the large space for the large space for playing fields and also the block of 8 for playing fields. So this is a sketch I did of the 530 lot. And you can see the community center to the left, and the police station and fire station are toward the bottom. And it just presents an idea of how the school could be situated on the 530 lot. It's obviously an unfinished sketch, but just provides a little bit of imagining how that space could be used. In addition to this thinking bigger and thinking longer term, this sketch, aside from showing the school, also shows how we could use the ellipse, the median in between, in the middle of West McIntyre, and enliven it a bit. If you go out there currently, it's kind of an unused space, and so I'm proposing that the village allow a pop-up cafe, and maybe they could even work out something with the current leaser of the community center cafe to open up a little spot on that ellipse. And I think you could fit some tables and chairs and thereby get some people to actually use that space. And I think it would be pretty low cost. And if it doesn't work out, it's just a temporary thing. But it's a good, I think it would be a good trial. So that's the last little bit.
Okay.
They're doing a planning.
So then, in summary, what we've proposed really is identical except for the location of where the state-of-the-art school would go. So people want to know, where's the money? And actually, could Todd come up here?
Okay, guys, you know what? This is a little beyond the scope of and we do have some other speakers.
We're almost done.
Okay, Steve.
We have a couple slides.
We just have a couple of slides. Is that what you just said?
A couple more. Okay. I think Todd really should be the one who makes this announcement of because we have other things we're going to talk about money here, but there's something on here that has to do with the new park at Heather and Hampton that I think, since we're talking money.
We applied for a Florida Community Trust grant, and it looks like we've been funded for a 40% reimbursement for our purchase of that property.
Oh, that's fun.
Of $830,000.
Well done.
Todd, would that be 40% of just the purchase price, or the purchase price plus the cost of the construction?
This grant was for the purchase.
You know what? It's found money. Good job. Thank you very much.
How did we go about finding this and doing this?
Todd.
How did it happen, Todd?
Todd
Did you
applies
know
for
about
grants.
this?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. We
that's
work
great.
with a grants consultant. We try to identify our best opportunities, and this was one we felt confident about.
But this is not the only park that we've done, right? Did we do
We've
the
applied,
village?
it's not the only active grant we
We
have.
improved the village green with grants.
Yeah, we almost every cycle we've gotten the Florida Recreation Development Assistant Program grant, and there's some other ones we're looking at. But when you purchase land for parks, it opens some opportunities.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm almost done, Mayor. So the Land Acquisition Fund currently has $6.1 million. The council said that each year, unless they opt out, that 1% would be added to that fund. And we've just heard about the grant money that came back from that $2.1 million purchase. And over the last year, we've had some discussions about private donations. I'll just label them as saying it's not impossible. And if they do come through, I believe that it would affect the order of any priority list of parcels. In what we're discussing, we're really saying that even though you have this $5.98 million in your fiscal year budget as a projected for this garage construction, we would advocate that you reallocate that parking money to purchase the block of original 8 parcels. And then, of course, at the time that a school is developed and parking needs to be addressed, then that would be something to do subsequently. So in closing, Pat talked about the importance of a pedestrian-friendly community. The Journal of the American Medical Association came out with an article not too long ago talking about the walking movement growing and neighborhood walkability gaining attention. And they have a program, Walk with a Doc. I've been in touch with them. We could easily have a chapter here. I'm not interested in leading it, but I'll be happy to coordinate with anyone who would be interested in finding out more about that. And that's it.
Steve, thank you very much. Brett, thank you very much.
Thank you
Whole
both.
Simon family, thank you for your contributions that you've always make to our community. Very much appreciated.
Thanks.
It was a lot of work.
Great ideas.
Great idea.
Good job.
Great ideas. Our next speaker is Laudi Ibarra.
Hi, I'm Laudi Ibarra. I live on 482 Fernwood Road. Well, here were some of the few ideas that we kind of put together. I spoke with Todd in a couple of months last week. And we were thinking about, it will be a great idea to purchase the land on 570 Fernwood and 571 Glenridge to make this an Olympic-sized pool and an interactive pool for the little ones. And this will allow to complete the second expansion of the community center, which will be closing up that pool and then turn it into like for performance or something, you know, simple like that. And then the current police parking lot, making it into a parking garage with a rooftop soccer field. And that way, you know, we can avoid the traffic and all that stuff. And then city and employees can also park there instead of the community center, which is a space that it's also needed. Also, to avoid the traffic, and this is, I know it's out of the topic, but how about bike sharing program for bikes? We were talking also, we have a lot of bikes that are not being used at all at the police station. Maybe pick one color and then paint them all and just have stations for the bikes around the key, and then people can use those. And then I think that those lots are very center, and people can just walk and use the bikes also to also avoid the traffic that is going on around the key.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Do we have any more public comments?
Bradley Newsom, 345 Pacific. I've been under the weather, so I'm not really prepared to say much tonight. But I will say 2 points. We have, I think we just have too much density, and that's the biggest problem. And I've come up here as long as I've lived here and said, reduce density. At every chance you get, houses smaller, whatever you can make smaller, make it smaller. And then we'll have less people needing all these places. I know it's hard to do because real estate's king on the island, but, and number 2 is I would ask you to dream, to go big. I think we have resources on this island. People have money. And I know there are people that don't want to spend it, but I think if they know what they're spending it on and they see what they're going to get for that money, I think they will be willing to do it. So go big. Think big. Don't hem yourself in. Is it a big bond thing? I don't know the mechanics of it. But the money we spend here on the Key, we spend efficiently, and we use it. My tax dollars pays for the community center and blah, 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 blah. And so just go big.
Thank you. Great way to end this workshop. Wonderful way. Yes. Mr. Meyer, please come up.
Ed Meyer, 798 Crandon. I prepared my notes a couple of days ago. So what I'm going to do is go through this, boil it down. There may be a thought or two in here that you want to act upon. May be good enough for that. Maybe 10 years ago, I lived in Solebury, Pennsylvania. 53% of our land was in a land trust. I made that point to the consul at that time, and some of the guys felt that sparked the idea for the Land Acquisition Committee. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I also lived in Connecticut, 2-acre zoning. So I lived in a couple of places with a lot of green space. Okay, notes. Now this is going to be controversial, but maybe we need a director of parks. Rather than combine parks with recreation, gets to be a big thing to handle, a lot of money, maybe not the attention that it should get or the vision that it should get. So maybe it's time to make that change. We need better branding for the Land Acquisition Committee. What does that mean to a lot of people? Well, maybe something like the neighborhood greening program brings it down to a benefit. Actually, this is a big opportunity to combine creative groups like Art in Public Places, the Landscape Committee, Historical Society, as well as land acquisition into a combined effort for better focus, better productivity, teamwork, and again, vision. So you bring those people in. They're not on the fringe. You get them involved in an organized way. We need a master plan. We got plenty of planning. I mean, it's fantastic. Put it into a simplified master plan, and it's going to make it easier to grasp. Keep it green. Concepts should be beautiful rather than becoming another tot lot or a skateboard park or something like that. We need strong concepts for these parks. Don't generalize from a specific or an individual opinion. Make sure you do enough research to know what the community really wants, and to do it periodically, every other year or every third year. It ought to go out, maybe in the Islander News, to get an update on what people think. The community is changing so fast, and opinions are coming so fast and varied that maybe we need that. We should need that. And lastly, let's see, getting through this. You got unfinished business. You got 530. What are you going to do with that? You got Calusa Park. You got the Playhouse. Mentioned that once. Playhouse. You got the Northwest Entry Block. And you got the Ocean Park Pavilion. What are you going to do with these things? So you need to address those and probably get a better handle on it and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I believe this concludes our workshop. Thank you, council members. Thank you, staff. Thank you so much for our community who came out to participate. And thank you, Land Acquisition Committee. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.